So this is the kind of image that I did for these 38 urban regions, Bangkok. So the dot line out there is about, I suppose, 80 to 100 kilometers for Bangkok. And the red area is not the city, it's what you see in a Landsat image. So it is the more or less all built area. So I can't work with cities because I don't know where the boundaries are and the mayor. What I call metro area, the all built area, is the red there, includes the suburb, adjacent suburbs. And then there are just a whole, we mapped about 40 different resources that had to do with natural systems and human uses of natural systems for our analysis. La próxima. I stopped mine. Okay, here's a city on the left. Does anybody from España know what city this is? This is Gibraltar. Sí, yo sé, entiendo todo eso. That's city of Gibraltar and the forest here. The reason for this is to emphasize the interaction, the interdependence of a city and the ring around the city. And so that city, if it didn't have the forest here, would have terrible flooding. It would have terrible mudslides down there. And the forest here is full of biodiversity. There's a lot of monkeys in it. And it's a major recreation site for the city. So that it's just a simple-minded example, but the interdependence of the city and the ring around the city, to me, is a very powerful idea. And if you buy into that, immediately you say, well, wait a minute. We're urbanizing, and we're urbanizing the nearest parts of what we need. We're urbanizing the ring around the city there, often the most valuable things. Yeah, here we are. We're urbanizing. I got my necktie in that by mistake, but that's the urban tsunami there. We're urbanizing. And our 38 urban region analysis, I picked 14 variables having to do natural systems and human uses of them, all 38 urban regions, and I did sort of a realistic model to see where the urbanization would take place and how they would affect water and all kinds of biodiversity and so forth. And I identified 4 types of urbanization, sort of generic types there, models you could call them. And the upper left is really concentric growth, and I mentioned earlier that it's not exactly concentric, it's really more like a series of bulges over time, but the net effect is concentric. The second one I call satellite cities, and here there's no growth around the big city, but all the growth is channeled to the satellite cities there. The third case is the transportation corridors or strip development or ribbon development. And the fourth case is sprawl or dispersed sites model. And those seem to be the 4 ways we urbanize. Now, no city has one of those. Any city has a combination of those, some common, maybe more toward this. We analyzed to see which was the best way and the worst way to do that, and the results are quite clear and quite interesting. The top 2, there's very little difference, and they were much better than the bottom 2, and which is also very little difference there. That's based on 14 environmental variables and 38 urban regions, these 4 models. So if you were going to urbanize, I would recommend strongly urbanizing either with the concentric rings or the satellite cities, or some combination, and avoiding the bottom 2. Of course, the bottom right describes my country. So, but it was really very, very clear there. Now, the next image is one way to help interpret that. I like models. I like simple models. So usually I like simple spatial models. This doesn't have to be spatial, but the simplest model I could think of is there are only 2 variables. There's nature and people. And if there are 2 variables, then there are 4 engineering, basic engineering. There are 4 interactions. And if you look at the top there, nature, this arrow here, has a positive effect on people. And there's some examples. Nature can have a negative effect on people. And there are some examples. people can have a positive effect on nature. There are not many examples, but they're the kinds of things you and I like to think we do. But the giant of the thing, the big arrow, is this: people having a negative effect on nature. Now, if you knew that, if you believe that, with 4 interactions, and one is a really big one, and those are only examples there. One is really big. You might want to design the world a little bit knowing that. And in fact, if you go back here, that would be a good rationale for not doing the sprawl model there. In other words, not mixing up the people and the nature because of that giant thing. So it's a very simple-minded way of interpreting the urbanization results that we had. Now, I'm not going to show you any other data from that Urban Regions book. If you're interested, it's just packed with data and analyses and so forth. But I was interested in the question of how much urban region planning occurs in cities. And much to my interest and surprise, I guess the bottom line of this is not much. But let me show you how I did that. Now, I'm an ecologist, I'm not a planner. So anybody who's a planner in the room can do better, hopefully. So on the left side are a whole lot of variables that I thought probably would come out of urban planning. In other words, these are the kinds of things you would probably have to think beyond the city to do, you know, a ring road out there or things like that. And then I simply said, all right, here are my 38 urban regions here. How many of those variables do I see in Landsat images and other evidence there? And there's my chart. And the first thing you see is that maybe a third of them, I don't see any of those in, none of them. I couldn't find any evidence. 2 of them I see quite a bit, Canberra and Brasilia. What do Canberra and Brasilia have in common? What's similar about the 2 of them? They're both planned cities. So you would hope there would be some urban region planning, but in fact, well, you know the history of the planning of those things. Brasilia very quickly outstripped its planning, and it was a city, and it quickly went beyond it. Canberra actually did a little bit better in some ways because they protected the water supply, which is far away from the city, in a nice way. So, but then there are a few cities here: London, Moscow, Roma, etc., más o menos, and not much here. So the bottom line there is, I can't find a lot of evidence of urban region planning. But I'm not a planner, I'm not an expert, you can do it better. So this was the work we did here a few years ago for Joan Clos, the Mosaico Territorial, and a wonderful team from Barcelona Regional. And we got 5 images of this, slides of this I want to show you. First of all, this is kind of the way I went at it. Let me say at the start that I never found a model for any city in the world which focused on a range of environmental issues as being important. In other words, I found transportation, I found sometimes water supply. San Diego has a very nice one for biodiversity. But the range of environmental issues, I found no model. So I had a lot of things we had to crank up. We had to start de novo and work with the Barcelona Regional team. But anyway, so this is the way I thought of it: as nature, food production, water, built systems, built areas. And let me just say that I wasn't interested in built systems in terms of getting more cars from here to there or commuter rail. But I was interested in ecological or the natural systems dimensions of built systems there, built areas there. Anyway, the first 2 were fairly easy for me. I thought the third one, water, was very difficult in a Mediterranean climate. Maybe everywhere it's difficult, but it was difficult here. And the last 2 were difficult also, and I didn't do them as thoroughly, I guess I would say there. And again, you could do them better. But I wanted to see sort of a way of thinking about organizing your thoughts if you were going to do an urban region. Here's a large green area relative to this conference. I was told at the beginning that well, let me express it this way. I said, here's some areas really important for biodiversity. And it was explained to me diplomatically that that would not fly, that I could not protect an area for biodiversity by itself. It just wouldn't work. However, if I could say here's an area that's really important for water supply or for recreation or for something else, and I want to extend it in some direction for biodiversity, that's good. That's the way to do it. So here's a big area, Monseigne, I think, which is a big recreation center. It's also a big water supply for the city that we're in here. So I ended up with the Emerald Network kind of idea, large parks and natural areas that are connected in various ways. And I only want to say one thing about the connection aspects there, that in an urban, if you remember back to my urban tsunami conclusion, if you have an urban region with a lot of built areas and highways and everything around, and you think about the United Nations Population Division data for the next 30 years, or projections, most of the corridors that we sort of blithely mark on our maps just aren't going to make it, I don't think. They're not going to survive urbanization, irrespective of climate change, but just urbanization, they're not going to make it. So I ended up with 5 different types of corridors here, and I think probably, this is in retrospect, 3 of them aren't going to make it with urbanization over 30 or 50 years. The ones that might make it, interestingly enough, are the extremes, and one of them is hard to, oh boy. I can't show you, but I can explain it. 2 medium-sized green areas near each other. A reconnection zone which connects them to turn them into one large one, which has a whole lot of benefits. I think there's a good chance that large areas, large green areas, can be protected long-term. So I think that the reconnection zone, and I had 2 or 3 of them there, I think that probably can be successful. And the second one, interestingly enough, is what I call a string of pearls, which is simply a path with a row of trees or a couple of rows of trees and connecting little green spots or pearls there. And the reason I think that may survive urbanization is because if the paths are used by people, there's a political support to keep them there. You can't cut them because we use that. And connecting little places along that tend to be neighborhood parks and places for things, playgrounds and little woods for walking and things like that. So again, there's a political support, neighborhood political support. So I think that kind of a corridor can survive urbanization if it's used